That's
right.
an old
Morning,
Italian
welcome to
thing.
Sunday Civics. We're back after a short 2-week break. It was nice to end the summer, end of the third quarter of the year, and begin an aggressive fourth quarter of the year. And the calendar has worked out perfectly here in Western New York. Woke up and it was a fall day. That winds of change coming through the area, and just like that, there's a Bills game today at 1:00 too. So go Bills. Anyway, thanks for joining us again, and thanks for in advance for a great fourth quarter coming up. This morning, the 9/11 stuff is all over the place, and I don't want to tread on any of it. But what strikes me in the last couple of weeks is I've been asking people, where were you when it happened? Because I wasn't in Manhattan, so it didn't happen to me. I wasn't in Shanksville, PA, and I wasn't in the Pentagon. So I was just in my house in Tonawanda, New York. So where were you when you learned of it happening? And then how did the day play out for you? Because if you were a mayor, all of a sudden you got phone calls from the state and then the federal. I mean, you're a civil servant. So a lot of things started to happen that day, which are going right through till today. So I started to ask people all over the place, hey, where were you? And it's funny because a lot of people said, well, I was 12 years old. That didn't help, right? Because they were just in school. I forget how old I've gotten. So I did want to reach out to some people who are in society and are somewhat local to us as well, and 3 different perspectives today. So I asked what is my favorite assemblyman, and you'll never know why he's my favorite assemblyman. It's not because of what you think. Yeah, I'll tell you, it's because he answers any question, anytime of any day. He just answers. That is a pet peeve of mine, that I'll point it at one person, say Governor Cuomo, former Governor Cuomo, who did everything by video answer. You couldn't actually ask him any questions. And this has become kind of a thing. People don't talk to the media anymore. I'm not the media, but they don't even talk anymore. So this guy who's on camera right now just talks to anybody. He's a throwback. And I laugh about it, but that makes him my favorite assemblyman. So without further ado, Assemblyman Angelo Mornello, how are you this morning?
I'm well, thank you, very well.
I don't think you'll want to be my favorite assemblyman, but you can't get away from it. I've announced it to the world.
This is about the people. I've been through enough, and I've got enough experience and background that I don't hide. I have feelings. Right. I have opinions. I never tell people what to do. I just give them my perspective or what the actual facts are that have been presented. Let them make their own decisions. But to hide from the media, and I found the media is very friendly to me because I'm accessible to them.
Right. And not only do you do that as a person, because you do, you're fine. Yeah. You're a great guy, but you do it. You know what? You're paid to do it. This is your job also. So, I mean, you're supposed to do this, and yes. All the rest do not. You stand out, unfortunately, because you just do it. So anyway, Enough of that. On 9/11, 20 years ago today, I was sitting, holding my 6-month-old daughter, and we watched the week unfold. It was stunning. What were you doing the days before and that morning? What happened?
Well, it's really interesting. Yesterday, my mother turned 100 on September the 8th of this year, which was last Wednesday. And yesterday we had her 100th birthday party. But in 2001, she would have been 80. She was 80 years old on September the 8th. And I had not ascended to the bench yet, because I wasn't officially appointed for the vacancy until December of 2001. So I was still a practicing attorney. But we had set up a situation with my sister and 2 of my cousins and an aunt who has passed since then to take her to a Yankees game. My mom loved the Yankees, as typical older Niagara Falls individuals. I had told her I couldn't go because I was being interviewed for the appointment opening in city court. My brother, who lived in Seattle, said he couldn't come, but he and I had planned to be at the hotel when they came in. Okay, so we flew to New York on September 7th, which was Friday. Surprised her, went to dinner at Carmine's that night. Saturday on the 8th, which was her birthday, we went to the Yankee game. We had her name on the screen. The whole Yankee Stadium stood up and sang happy birthday to her. This is why I have a vivid memory, because of a situation, okay? Yeah. but she always wanted to go to De Niro's restaurant. So that night, September the 8th, we went to De Niro's, which is in the shadows of the Twin Towers. Okay. Came home the 9th. The 10th, I went to work. The morning of the 11th, I had family court. And I remember this vividly. I was standing at the check-in desk at family court on Cedar Avenue. And I get a phone call from my mom, and I think the call was probably around 10 o'clock, okay, somewhere in that vicinity. And the call was, are you watching what's happening? And I said, Mom, I'm in court. Remember, in 2001, we didn't have instantaneous messaging. There weren't, access by phone to radio stations. And she tells me I'm watching television, and there was they came in with an announcement, and she started telling me what she's seeing on TV. Nobody else knew. So then immediately I mentioned to others that something happened at the Twin Towers in New York City. And at first they thought it might have been a private plane. I don't know if anybody remembers this, that just went off astray or had engine trouble when it hit the first tower. But they didn't realize exactly what it was at the moment, because it was just so new. Then when they hit the second tower, so immediately everyone scrambled either to their homes or to their offices or to the cars to try and get a radio report. These were the attorneys and internally. And as the day unfolded, we became more concerned in Niagara Falls, because the concern was it was an attack on our country. And what do? You cut the power. So if you cut the power to most of the Northeast, or at least New York, what do? You blow up the plant that we have here. The next was destroy the natural wonder, which is the falls. So Niagara Falls was put on a higher alert than some of the villages and towns, because the assets that we had here were assets that they felt might be attackable by a foreign nation should this be a wholesale attack. So the rest of that day and then that week was just watching. And I'll never forget, around that time, within that week, that if you recall, they talked about if you see something, say something, be on alert, all American. So I'm driving down the Robert Moses Parkway, the park by Niagara University, which is now the Niagara Scenic Parkway. And I see a ladder leaning up against the wall as I'm driving towards Lewiston. So immediately, and this was right by the power plants, right? So immediately I called 911 because I saw this ladder. As it turns out, it was maintenance on the wall. But everybody became a little more heightened and alert. And I mean, we became watching. The other interesting thing that folded was the show of patriotism. Within a week, every flag was sold out. People were flying them. People were coming together. And it was really interesting because a tragedy brought the country more together at that time. So, but because of my mother's birthday, there's always vivid memories.
Wow, you were in the shadow. You were at the World Trade Center a couple days before.
2 days before.
And home. And then the other thing that strikes me about what you said is that it's 10 o'clock and you're an attorney at the door, at the window, and your mother calls. It happened at 8:41 or 8:46.
Yeah.
And it's inconceivable now that you wouldn't have heard for an hour and a half.
Right. My phone would have buzzed. Okay. Immediately.
The court would have shut down, right? The court hadn't told you. Your mother told you.
Yeah.
It's just how different the world has become, that 90 minutes is now forever. We talked about the Civil War, it ended on April 9th, and it was still being fought 2 weeks later because nobody got the word.
Well, that's Juneteenth.
Yes, right.
Okay.
So this matters. These 20 years have really changed. And we didn't have a smartphone. You didn't have any way of knowing. There weren't TVs in every office. I don't think they were flat at that point. Weren't they still big tubes?
Yes.
So the world is so different now. It took 90 minutes and your mother identified it for you. That's amazing.
Yes. It is. And it could have been like 9:30. I forget, but it was in that time frame. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't instantaneous, which it would have been today.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm sorry, Tom, go on.
Oh, no, it's okay. So then let me fast forward to today, because what people don't understand really is that as an assembly person, you're one of 150. But when you go into that room as only one of 150, the person sitting next to you or across from you or getting a soda in that green hallway, that's their district, or Queens is their district, or the Bronx right there. And they have a very different impression than you have. Their constituents are right there. And you get to mingle with those people as well. And I know you just had a special session. Was this anything you've talked to some New York City officials about recently too that had stories?
No, and I'll tell you the reason was because they had the special rules in. So we weren't all allowed in the chamber at the same time. We were limited on numbers. We had to have masks. We watched the proceedings in our offices, and then they broke the entire assembly into groups. And then they would call for that group to go from the LOB, which is our offices, get over to the Capitol. That then we would go in one at a time, register our vote, then we had to go back to our office. So there really wasn't the opportunity to mingle. But if I may, one of my friends who lost the primary, one of the majority members out of New York, Mike Dendecker, great assemblyman. He was the chair of the Veterans Committee when I first got there, and I was on the Veterans Committee. He was in sanitation in New York City on 9/11. And one of his functions, he was in management, was to work on the cleanup and the debris in New York City. So we would talk about that and the challenges that he had. Unfortunately, he lost in a primary to an Ocasio-Cortez-backed socialist Democrat. And Mike was a moderate. He was a great, he's a Democrat. Okay, he, Joe Lenthal, a few my other friends that I had made there. They invited, this is funny. I mean, it's not 9/11, but you're talking about the colleagues and how we talk, okay?
Oh, it's a big state, yeah.
Yeah, well, I was the only Republican invited to the longest running card game in the history of Albany, okay? Yeah. And it was penny ante stakes, but I made good friends there, okay? But they were all from those districts surrounding there, okay? And they did talk about how things changed, how the demographics of the city changed, how the populations changed, people moved, but everybody came together at that time. Right. And Joe Lenthal, between his father and his grandfather, they had served the assembly for over 100 years. Right. So he was an assembly member. Yes, he was at the time of 9/11. So he had his hands full. And the biggest problem was assessing what the magnitude of what happened. And then spinning back as to the day in the weeks following, what they determined, part of the reason those towers came down was the jet fuel that burned at such a high velocity that it melted the steel. Mm-hmm. So in addition to the technology of communication, it also improved technology of building materials to avoid something like that in the future.
You're very much on the inside of this stuff, being in going to Albany back and forth. So don't tell me anything you can't tell me. But it wasn't the first time they tried to bring down the towers. 94, they tried to bring down somebody, whoever they would be. And so are people still plotting this? We're not through it. Is it constant? Do we live with this for the rest of our lives? Have there been targeted attacks that we've foiled on, whatever the next tallest building is? Or
well, let me tell you, this is not on the inside, but I think that what that day did for this country was made us realize that we are as vulnerable as European countries. And we know that there was, in the Middle East, there was constant strife, attacks, destruction. Throughout Europe, it always happened. And I think that Americans, because of the soldiers, Americans, because of believing they were Americans, because of the bravery, that we felt we were immune to foreign attack and that we had our ducks in a row.
We had been for 200 years, pretty much. Yeah. Right. But we're not, right?
No, not anymore. Because so now there's a heightened aware of security. Like yesterday when they are, yesterday in New York City, they had to do heightened aware, but let's go back to that time period. If you recall Times Square, they started putting up towers and they had additional security in Times Square. because nobody knew whether there was another wave coming. Okay, and it's interesting. After that, I had a 1 or 2 years later, I visited a friend in. I'm trying to think of Boston, but I flew into a little airport, and it was the airport that some of the hijackers had flown into and then drove to their destined location. So, I mean, it was well thought out, because what that showed me was they planned. This was well planned. We're not going to fly into the big airports where people are really watching security. This is before the attack. So they flew into all these small, remote areas that were not as heightened, that they could just blend in, and a couple here, a couple over somewhere else. So it was a planned out attack when you look at all of that, put it together. But now I think that we've got the ability to keep on track and look. Unfortunately, it's cost a lot more money for security, cybersecurity, all of this. But in the long run, it's all about protecting the citizens of this country. It's all about America maintaining its strength and individuality in the world. And we always listen, we can't change history. We cannot change where a stronger preys on a weaker, whether it's an individual. Thank God that we have the Me Too movement, because men used to prey on women. Let's not kid each other. I'm a realist. I've seen a lot. I've been around a long time, and I've seen transitions. And we know countries, stronger countries, prey on weaker. Let's look at what Russia has done. Let's look what China is trying to do. Okay, and they're all doing it. So if you're weak, they're going to come at you. So it's important to show strength and unity within your own boundaries.
Yeah. Well, I know you've been around a long time, but when I talk to your mother, you're just a kid. So
yeah, I know.
It's all perspective. It's
Yes,
all where you're coming from.
Yes.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing that, because it will never go away. That's a memory now that I'll have of you, of where you were when that happened. And it must be just stunning to both you, your mother, your brother in Seattle. I mean, that you were there, that this happened so strangely.
Yes.
48 hours difference, and you'd have been in the soup. It's just stunning how the world works.
I think if I was there,
and to the best of your knowledge, they did not ever really seriously target the power plant. And conversely, the power plant is ready for anything that would happen, right?
That is correct. That is correct, Tom.
Will always be a target.
Yes.
But they're ready.
Always.
Yeah.
And so we just have to be prepared. Unfortunately, we can't let down our guard. Kind of like a boxing match, right, Tom. Okay. If you let down your guard, you get knocked out. So
you're not going back to Albany that you know of before December, maybe? Is there an end of session?
Not that I know of. I don't anticipate it. Okay. There's been talk of a couple other bills they wanted through, but we're into almost the first third of September. As we go forward, we've got a November election that people are going to want to remain in their districts for, to help those other candidates. And then we get into the holidays. So I do not anticipate. I anticipate we'll be back there the first Wednesday after the first of the year, which is the Constitution says it's the first Wednesday. Unless the first Wednesday is the first of the year, then it becomes the second Wednesday.
Growing pains with a new governor, or seamless transition because it's only going to be a short time anyway? I
think seamless I don't think is the right word. And I'll tell you why. She's bringing in all new staff. Okay. And she's purging anyone who was part of the perceived scandals from before. I think that when the judiciary report finally comes out, I think you're going to see the other shoe dropped on the number of people that are in power. But let's face it, I want to praise her at this point. I was so impressed with her first press conference downstate with the hurricane damage. She was absolutely, it wasn't about her. It was about the workers. It was about the people. It was about her praising those that stepped up immediately. And I think she's got a good handle. She's been around. I also firmly believe there are those that are saying she should have known what's going on. She was kept out of the loop. And let's not forget, She wasn't the favored candidate for lieutenant governor in the previous election, okay, for governor. She had to win a primary before she could run. So I think that at that point, there showed a little bit of a split in the offices. So, and she was on the road all the time. Now, did she know that there was an authoritarian type of government? More than likely. Did she know the details? I will give her the benefit of the doubt. Okay. But I think she has come to the table and stepped up. But one thing I'm hoping is that she does see the need for to immediately convene some kind of a committee consisting of all experts, psychologists, police, fire, district attorneys, proponents of the bail reform, not so much opponents. See, it's all either all or nothing. And I think we have enough statistics now to at least do an initial look at is the criminal justice reforms causing some of the violent crime? Because we know if you get away with something small, you keep building, or if it has just the pandemic. But I think we can't ignore the fact that we have to take a look at it. And I would want to believe Bill Hochul, her husband, who was the U.S. attorney for the Western District, may have some feelings on the need to look at what's happening. Because remember, during his tenure, law and order. So I'm not saying I'm opposed or for the massive changes, but what I am supportive of, let's take a look at it. Even though it's only been a short while, I think there's enough out there that we can at least take a look to see if there needs to be some massaging and some adjustments.
All right. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm going to sign off and go to breakfast with my grandkids, which you met.
Which I met. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right,
have
bye-bye.
a great day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, that was State Assemblyman Morinello. Assemblyman Morinello. The names and calling him Assemblyman or his first name Angelo is always gives me a tongue twister. So we're just wanted to talk to people who had their real life experience on 9/11. What were they doing? Because it did change the world. Frontline had a great segment this week on America in the 20 years since 9/11. Definitely worth watching. But where were certain people on that day? And then, what were they doing? How did they find out? And we just learned that a somewhat public official, even though he wasn't sworn in at the time, it took 90 minutes almost for him to get a phone call, and he was in a public building. So today that would have happened instantaneously. You'd got a phone message. It would have been a lockdown, shut down, everybody leave the building situation. 90 minutes later, he was still filing court papers in court until his mother called and told him something was going on. So another person on the job that day was attorney Roberta O'Toole. She was a attorney at the time, but I also think she was a town employee or official, but I'm not sure, but she'll bring us up to speed on that. So I'd like to bring in Roberta O'Toole if we can, if Mike can get Bobby up on screen. There's Mike Reed runs the show here and puts everything there. There's Bobby. How are you, Bobby?
Hi, are we working now?
We're working. You're on. You're live. The whole world is seeing you.
Okay, very good.
So, we just heard Assemblyman Morinello. It took 90 minutes and he was in a court building at the time. So that just wouldn't happen today. Where were you in the days leading up to, or it was just like now, a beautiful fall weekend. What were you doing? What happened to you that day? And were you a town official yet or no? But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I was a town attorney, but I was also Department of Social Services attorney. And on that morning, I was actually in, like Judge Morinello, I was in family court, but I was in North Tonawanda doing support collections. We had a fairly busy calendar, but we thought it was strange when only one or two people showed up. The people who were supposed to be there weren't there, and I think the calendar started about 9:15, and we didn't really know what happened till about 10 o'clock. I think that's probably the time frame. Somebody came in and told us, and somebody in the building had a small portable television. So we actually were watching on television as the second plane hit.
Really? Huh. And so when you say people that weren't showing up, you mean employees or clients?
People who were supposed to be in family court for support collection cases just weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
and we couldn't figure out why for a long time.
And again, it's hard for people. I was saying, I asked some people at work this week where they were, and they said, well, I was 12. Like I forget how old we are. But you were at work and you don't have a phone on your body. I mean, you can't get your head around that today. You were just at work and there was no instantaneous anything, right?
No, actually in court, yes.
Yeah. So then as it unfolded, were you mesmerized watching the television? Were you ushered out? I'm thinking of the January 6th Capitol riot assault. People are immediately, gotten into places. It wasn't that way, right? You just sat down and probably watched the television. They didn't close the office.
There was no there was no sense of urgency, at least in the North Tonawanda Civic Building.
Mm-hmm. And did you feel like, the second plane hits, but then the Capitol plane hits the Pentagon, and then a plane goes down on Pennsylvania. We don't know it's over. Like for days, we're still thinking something else is going to happen. What did you do after you found out?
I think we might have been, I think they closed the courts at some point, and that was before we heard the other targets had been hit.
Mm-hmm. And not only the courts, but it was primary day in New York State. So there was an election going on. Polls open at 6 a.m. They didn't immediately close them, from what I remember. They didn't close till about 11 o'clock or so. Do you remember it being primary day?
I don't remember, although there would have been a polling place in the building that I was. I don't remember that particular aspect of it.
And you know what? Niagara County might have opened at 9, right, for primaries. I don't know if you opened at 6. Only certain counties opened at 6 a.m.
They might even have opened at noon. I'm not sure.
What did you do for the town at that time?
I think it was a town attorney, but by the time I left the family court building, everything was shut down.
Mm-hmm. But then in the days that followed, I remember I had a friend that worked in government, and he was in Jamestown. And, one of these you talk every morning type things, and all of a sudden wouldn't talk anymore. Like government put a lockdown on people or made them believe you can no longer speak to anyone because we have secret plans for security and blah, blah, blah. It was bizarre. It changed on a personal level also. So as a town official, were you told, we now don't do this and we now have to do, we certainly didn't have swipe cards.
But... No, we were, Wheatfield is a fairly small town. Well, in the scheme of things, a fairly small town. Eventually, I don't think there was even court security back then, even in family court or in town court. But that's since changed, and there is security both in town hall and in all of the courtrooms.
You spent decades with the town in one capacity or another. How did you see it go from 9/11, 2001 to, today? How did it morph slowly in those early years towards we're going to institute, security. We're going to institute a swipe card. You must sign in when you get to work. What was some of the first things that started to happen maybe as that week played out or the whole month? We got pretty serious about it.
It wasn't that quick. It wasn't that quick, no.
Huh. And was it?
There's also a state law that requires governments to take reasonable efforts to protect employees. Now, at least in some department, there's even barriers between the workers and the public.
Right. And that didn't happen right away, but I mean,
That didn't happen right away. That has happened in the last 5 to 10 years.
and did it happen just because, or were there incidents that it needed to happen?
I think in Wheatfield there were incidents that would have hastened the institution of those types of things, because over the years, um, some of the constituents or other people needing services um, became a little bit more unruly and more disrespectful toward the employees. So I think it was necessary to do things to protect them.
Yeah. Did you notice in Wheatfield is unique in that it had, I believe, the first ever, I don't know what it's called, Muslim Center, Islamic Center. It took over Suzanne's Fine Dining. What's it called?
Islamic Cultural Center. But there had been one previously on 19th Street, and the individual who ran that eventually moved the operation to Wheatfield, and I think some new people took over the 19th Street mosque.
So did you ever interact with people because they were in Wheatfield? Did you have contact setting that up or approving permits or whatever you were doing with the town? I mean, I guess my overall impression is, what happened to a Muslim on that day? Like, what was their impression?
I don't know. They didn't come in until later, and I never had any approval. I wasn't involved with their purchase of the building, nor on behalf of the town. There were really no permits that were required. They weren't required to get a zoning variance. They weren't required to get a building permit because the building was already there. Nothing was required.
Yeah. I guess, we paint everybody with broad brushes, but I'm just wondering, it's almost like one of these movies where you have 7 different scenarios of, everybody's life changed that day, but not in the same way. How did it all change that day? I'm sure if we had the chief of police on, they were issued and told to do different things for the rest of their lives, for the rest of their careers. Things changed. I just wonder what happened in different communities. I'm sorry.
I think I did tell you that my church has Saturday services once a month, and we had one last evening, and there were a couple of police officers there who were on duty on September 11th, and their first concern was for their families. They called their spouses, and they were also aware of the possibility of potential targets in Niagara Falls, especially the power plant, I suppose the international bridges, and the falls itself, because nobody really knew at the time how massive the scheme or the plot was. We just didn't. Nobody knew.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Another interesting observation was one of the people at last night's service was a teacher who was teaching at Niagara Falls High, and he was advised of what happened, and then went back into his class, and the students were really afraid. They were afraid that the school would be attacked, or that the city would be attacked. So his job, as he said, was to sort of reassure them. And he said a couple of things. One, that the building was so new that it wouldn't have been on any maps. So teaching at Niagara Falls, I forget exactly when Niagara Falls High was first opened, but it was a pretty new building back on 9/11. And he also said, well, um, we really wouldn't have to worry here in Niagara Falls, because they would take one look at the city and said,
Somebody got here first.
yeah, they destroyed it themselves.
Well,
and that,
you know, a friend of mine from Albany went to school. He was in first grade in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. And that things that happened, again, the communications were not what they were there, but he was at a Catholic school and they locked all the Catholic schools down for whatever it was in 1963 because they were hunting Catholics. Whoever killed the president were hunting Catholics. So the things that get said or come into our consciousness at these traumatic moments are bizarre. They're not true. Nobody was hunting Catholics. So I just wonder if the same kind of paranoia, it permeated Niagara County or the town of Wheatfield, or, you were now called and told, don't issue, driver's licenses, whatever the bizarro stuff is. It seems like we have the capacity to get crazy. Just wondered if any of that happened in your sphere.
no, it really didn't. It really didn't. I think the question could have been really more of speculation as to what might happen, but other than the fact that all airplane travel was shut down for a number of days, and afterwards the security was instituted. It was a different. It's a different world. The other thing that people were talking about last night at the church service is they had a longing to go back, not to September 11th, but to September 12th, when everybody came together.
Right. It's sad that a tragedy like this or anything brings us all together. We kind of need to be brought together to now, but that Frontline special that was on the other night, just unbelievable how good a job Frontline does. We're where we are today, storming the Capitol, in great resolve for what's happened since 9/11. It changed the world in that way that over the last 20 years, we're in a bad place. Domestic terrorism is now prevalent as much as international terrorism.
Oh, well, it's homegrown now.
Yeah. And maybe that's what your congregation was talking about last night. I mean, we can't all come together and just hold hands and sing songs. We were never that. We'll never be that. But I don't understand the Civil War mentality and what it's for. Like, I don't even know what both sides are arguing about anymore, right?
And I suppose the difference between outside terrorists is that they're attacking all of us. And when we have inside terrorists, it is American against American.
And to what purpose I get to? We really get micro there. I mean, they attacked us for whatever reason they had one. Why are we attacking each other now? I don't understand. It starts to just become, I'm a big Beatles fan, right? And at the end of their togetherness, they were yelling at each other in the studio, and it's a movie coming out this fall, I think. But they just looked at each other and said, "Hey, it's me." Like we're yelling at each other about something, but we love each other. It's just me. We don't seem to be able to get to that "it's just me" point. People are blowing each other up, for God's sakes. 150 police officers were attacked on January 6th. I mean, to what end? Why? Five of them committed suicide. To what end are we doing this? So I'll say to you on TV, Bobby, it's me, it's you. We can hug it out, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Well, thanks for sharing that this morning. I very much appreciate it. And especially the stories about the congregation too. I think if you could help this, I'll make this ask of you. In the last quarter of this year, let's bring the religion, the parishes of Niagara Falls into our discussion, because they're civics. They're more civics than a lot of things. We need to do that. We haven't done that in the first 3 quarters of the year.
We can do that. Yep.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Okay. You too. Thanks.
Have a great weekend. All right. Go Bills too, as well. So we've heard from Angelo Morinello, and Bobby, sign off the screen there. There we go. So Angelo Morinello was not yet a city court judge. He was installed in December of 2001, but he was in New York City the weekend before. That was quite a story, and it took 90 minutes. He was at the counter in a civic building that hadn't closed down. Plane struck at 8:41. Around 10 o'clock, he's still doing court papers in court. And so Roberta O'Toole just told us she was in court as well, waiting for court to start. Wouldn't happen today. You'd have known at 8:41 immediately when the plane hit. So I also wonder, what was it like that morning? I was sitting in my living room. Angelo Morinello was in court. Roberta O'Toole was in a different court in North Tonawanda. What would it be like if you didn't have your personal freedom to be told or watch TV? So what would it be like if you were in prison that morning? So it's 9/11 at 8:41 in the morning, and you're incarcerated. How did you find out? What were the days after that like? So I reached out to the internet community, and somebody responded. Anthony Pugh, who is in Seattle, so it's very early for him this morning, so we appreciate him. If we could bring Anthony on screen. Anthony was incarcerated from 1993 to 2020. That's a long time, not years, sure is a long time, years, but in 93, we certainly didn't have cell phones. We didn't have the internet. 2020, we had the internet in our pocket. So Anthony lived through quite a bit of change that he missed because you were not available for the internet in prison that I know of. But also, the planes hit the towers. What happens when you're in prison? Anthony, thanks for joining us this morning from Seattle.
Good morning.
So you heard all me. I talk too much. I talk too long, and hopefully I'll know you for the rest of my life. So thank you, but you don't know me now. Tell me, what was it like that day, either leading up to that day or that morning and the morning, the days after? What was it like for you that day?
What's interesting is being in prison like that, we got news probably faster than anybody else did. Because we're in such a small, tight confinement. Like where I was living, the prison that I was at, we had 33 cells with 1 or 2 people in there. So there's about 50 people in 3,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm out in the morning getting ready for work. So I was just getting done with a shower.
Wait,
when a friend of mine.
So when do you wake up in the morning? It's 5:30 there. What's your morning routine?
There in that time, I woke up at about 5 o'clock in the morning so that I could shower, because between 6 and 6:45, they do what's called count. And they come in and they count every single inmate physically.
Okay.
And so I try to get my shower in before 6 o'clock. So I'm just finishing up my shower, and a friend of mine that had just finished his up earlier walks in and he turns the TV on to watch news. And he hears about the first one, and he yells through the doors that they just threw a plane in the towers. So I ran up into my cell and turned my TV on. You were allowed to buy TVs for yourself back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a little 13-inch screen TV, and I turned it on, and I was able to watch the second one go live through. And I was just sitting there dumbstruck watching that. They do count. And because everything was happening, it took a long time to clear count, because even the officers were all discombobulated trying to figure out what to do.
So count would normally start at 6, you're saying? And
yeah,
we're 20 minutes into the chaos. They must not know what's going on, but they got to go do count. You don't know what's going on, but you got to stand for count. Like, it had to be strange, right?
Yeah, it was very strange. And everybody that's working in the kitchen had already prepped breakfast for that morning. And they're all trying to figure out, the whole administration's trying to figure out, do we even run breakfast?
Right. Yeah. And so when do the guards get their shit together? Like when does anybody, and did you become closer together? Like the guards the guards didn't treat you as prisoners. You didn't treat them as guards. Did everybody come together for a minute, or no? Was it even worse? You were more the enemy. They were more the enemy. What was the human factor?
It was more peaceful for a while in there because everybody felt like there was a common enemy. Even the Muslims weren't harassed an extreme amount.
Yeah, because Islam or Muslim or whatever these terms are, because I'm very ignorant of this stuff, is prevalent in prison. Halal meat, demands for certain diets. You're telling me there was no hostility. Everybody was shocked and brought together by this.
Yeah, because in there, we all looked at each other as, in that specific facility, we were all very close. Two of my friends were workout partners that were both Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
So for me in particular, I was very close to a lot of Muslims, and I actually worked in the chapel as a clerk, helping run all the events for every different kind of religion.
Okay, so you get through count, and then what happens? When now we're really into it.
Count probably cleared about a half hour later than normal, so a little after 7 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
which would be 10 o'clock your time.
Right.
They
So
run
it's full on.
chow, and I go in, I go eat, and I come back, and I come back and I rush to eat breakfast.
Because you want to watch
come
TV.
back, yeah.
Okay.
And then so I come back and watch more TV, and that's when I actually physically watched. Just minutes after I came back from eating breakfast is when I watched the towers start falling.
Jesus. Right. And what's going through your head now? I mean, right?
Yeah, now I'm just dumbstruck of like, oh my God, what? Because you don't even think about what's going to rebuild when it's the plane, but then the whole entire tower completely collapses. And now you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Because at first it was, okay, people might survive, but then you're like, oh, how many people were still left in there?
And of the 50 people in your pod, did you hear almost a gasp or deafening silence when they started to fall down? I mean, I'm sure everybody was glued to their TV if they had one.
Yeah, that's the only time that you ever probably knew that every TV in the place was at the same thing. And then they had for people that didn't own TVs, they had a day room TV.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably the only time that you ever didn't have arguments about what was going to be on the day room TV.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So that happens. How do you start to what was your first reaction? First of all, did you think that, well, the television's telling you some reaction stuff, but when did everybody start to know it was a foreign attack on the U.S. and the 4 incidents? I mean, I guess all from TV, right? You go to bed that night. It was a quiet day. Did you go to your job that day?
I actually did. They closed down what was called Correctional Industries, which is the place that makes license plates and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a fairly what would be considered today, what a common term we use today, essential job. I worked in the chapel, and so I had to go to the chapel as soon as I could. As soon as they started clearing things up, they kept us locked down for quite a few hours for the prison to even try to figure out what's going on.
Right.
But then for the rest of the day, correctional big businesses like Correctional Industries, they went ahead and just stayed shut down for the rest of the day. But I went to work because it would be pretty essential for me to help the chaplain get other sponsors and volunteers to come in for all the other religions so people could have somebody to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was probably the biggest place, busiest place in the prison was the chapel.
Really?
Yeah.
And what were people talking about?
There were some people that had family that lived in that area and things like that. And people were just really distraught because in there, we didn't have the freedom to go out and contact people and try to find out what's wrong. And we're stuck with all our news just strictly being on a TV and that's it.
So let me fast forward to some general stuff. Is that on the outside, we were all unified that day, but slowly we weren't. Like, we looked at people with a headscarf differently. We looked at a Muslim differently because you're supposed to see something, say something, and people are reporting people, at the supermarket because they're looking at fruit. I mean, it became a little bit tense. And then we went to war over this. And it's playing out that, maybe we weren't in the right wars for this thing. So how did that play out on the inside with your now quite friendly, everybody being together mentality of all the religions blending fine? Did it also on the inside fracture a little bit like it did on the outside, or no?
It fractured because the Muslims, it felt like they became more emboldened about pushing their agendas.
Did they? Yeah.
There was no halal diet in prison at that time.
Okay.
But about 5 years later, they started a lawsuit that pushed halal diets. And so they used to have things called fundraisers where we would raise money by buying food items. And one of the groups that I was involved with, which was called Lifers Organization, we ran a fundraiser that actually gave money out to the streets for a lady to go to college. We would mark up every food item $1 to $2, and people would buy it. And we would raise $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 at a time doing that.
Wow.
Well, one fundraiser we did was pizzas. The Muslim community threw a temper tantrum because there was pork on some of them pizzas. And they were warmed up in the same ovens that their meals were cooked in.
Right.
They had already got pork banned from the main diet, but now pork was even banned from, and so it was starting to create a lot of fracture of, hey, who are you to tell me I can't eat pork anymore?
Yeah.
Just because it's your religious choice doesn't mean it's mine. And so with that emboldenment of filing lawsuits, pushing the agenda to not only having a halal diet, but stopping certain items from being even brought into the prison.
Yeah. When we started to retaliate from 9/11, I'm sure, again, you're tied to your television for years. How was that met in prison? Now we're attacking countries. You might have friends that were from those countries inside. How did that, was everybody as united and friendly while we went to war, or did that cause some problems? How was that received? Our retaliation for 9/11?
There were certain groups that were tensioned about that. And I had a bridge game going every night, and it was weird. You'd almost like it was a UN bridge game because you had an atheist, a Mormon, a Jew, and a Muslim from Pakistan.
Did you get along?
We all got along great.
Yeah. But you didn't discuss the wars, I'm sure, or did you?
We did.
And how would the Pakistani consider the war?
He really he actually helped explain to me the different factions of the Muslim communities and the Islamic communities to understand that his faction didn't support that same kind of mindset. And he helped me understand that only 7% of Muslims actually felt that way.
The way of attacking us.
Yes.
Yeah.
The jihadist kind of mindset.
Right. 7%, because it seems dominant as we look at pulling out of Afghanistan and that kind of thing. I mean, 7% now in charge. Yeah,
it seems to have grown since that time period. The percentage, I don't know what it would be now, but at that time, that was what it was.
You know, you had television as we approached 2020. You're released in 2020. You didn't have internet, of course. You didn't have a smartphone, or did you?
Not until just last year.
So how do you go in 93, basically with a dial phone and landline, and come out in 2020 with a computer on your pocket? How did you handle that kind of change?
I was lucky enough to have quite a bit of education while in prison. I
Can
learned.
anything educate you on having a computer in your pocket? I mean, that seems space age.
Yeah, there was a lot of things that were surprising. Things that you wouldn't even notice were things that surprised me. Like, I pushed a crosswalk button and the crosswalk talked.
Yeah. Never happened before in 93, right?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
And then the bus announcing the stops and things like that, because I took the bus for months when I first got out.
I mean, I don't mean to be weird, but did you feel like you got out into a different planet in 2020?
It felt really like a different planet because I got out in the heart of COVID.
Right. It's shut down.
Yeah. The whole entire state is shut down.
Huh. Well, did that seem weird to you? Because it seemed weird to us. I mean, we'd never seen anything like that. You picked right up on the same part.
For us, prison is a very slow experience. And in a ways, it's actually weird that it helped me.
I would imagine it was a slow. I would imagine that would help it slowed everything down. Everybody was locked at home. It gave you a little bit more of a cushion to, get back into the groove, right? Or no?
It did give me a cushion to get back into the groove, but it also made it a real struggle because I learned carpentry and construction in there, and that's my trade.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing going on. So how am I supposed to get out with nothing to myself, except for a few $1,000s that I had saved up while I was in there? Because people don't realize in prison, you consider 42 cents an hour as a paycheck, a very good paycheck.
Right. Different perspectives.
Yeah. So we don't make a lot of money. We don't save a lot of money when $50 a month is your biggest paycheck.
Right.
And so I didn't have a lot of money to bring out here. And now I'm trying to figure out how to survive and get it. And so I ended up just doing a handyman business.
So you spent quite a number of years in prison, but you still are young enough to make a difference. How do we bring you back into the civics equation? Have we? Do we keep you out? COVID is a tough way to describe it, but do you feel brought back in? Is there more we could be doing? How do we get you involved? And you being every prisoner that ever gets kicked, let out.
I think a lot of states have laws and agendas that for a lifetime shun prisoners.
Yeah.
And that adds to the recidivism.
Right.
If you don't let us get out and get orientated back into society and keep everybody shunned, then they're just going to keep going back.
Right. And it's not, we love to, my favorite saying, it's not broken. We built it this way. So we want you shunned, I would think, right? I mean, we created everything in the world that keeps you marginalized. Do you think we can fix that? I mean, and can you help you fix that? Because if we don't bring you into the civics discussion, you're not going to be in the civics discussion. You know what I mean? Like you got to be at the table. Like you had that card game of the UN. We need the virtual card game of everybody at the table, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what we need. We need people to have a view and a mindset of, would you rather have a monster getting out as your neighbor Or would you rather have your friend? And so it really is, how do you look at us just because somebody made a mistake? In my situation, a lot of people that I talk to that find out that I did prison time, they can accept me probably a little bit easier than most guys because I was 15 years old and went in prison. So they can look at me and go, okay, you were just a kid and you made a mistake. They don't look at 25, 30-year-olds that do that.
Yeah. Huh.
But they still need to still have that mindset of, hey, how can we help you?
But you're 15 and you make a mistake and you serve 27 years for that mistake. That seems tough because at 15, you're not all that bright. I mean, you're not an adult yet. You're not even, talk about not having a computer in your pocket. I mean, you're a nothing at 15. That seems punitive. I don't know. I don't know where I am with this. Prison's a fascinating thing to me because we've got a lot of talent and lost people there. And like you say, once you get out, you're not out. We've built it so that you're kind of thrown away for the rest of your life. And yeah. I think part of Civics is fixing that somehow. If you have something to contribute, we've got to hear from you. And if you don't, if you're a monster who's just out by mistake, you should go back in and you will. We don't know each other, but we gotta do something, don't we? I mean, we can't have everybody just drifting.
No, and I can put a panel together of at least a half a dozen guys that all did well over 20 years in prison. Mm-hmm. And we're all out here doing amazing things.
Right.
I run a handyman company and I'm busy for the next 3 weeks at all times.
I'm going to ask you I'm going to hold you to that because I need your help. We'll talk offline and we'll get to know each other, but I think this is a vast untapped resources. Our tagline is all of us are smarter than any of us. You've had a life I have not had, and I've had a life you haven't had. And we need to meld those together to go further. And not everybody's quite open to that, but if we can do that, the possibilities are limitless. I need you to contribute to this stuff.
Yeah, I would love to.
All right, we're out of time today. We might do another whole show just with you and your friends, some people that your card game, your exterior card game. Maybe we'll do that online, but we're out of time for today. I can't thank you enough, Anthony, for sharing with us.
All right, thank you.
All right, Anthony Pugh shared with us. Thanks to him. Thanks in advance for everything he's going to share with us. And Angela Morinello and Roberto O'Toole, we're back for the fourth quarter of 2021. Have a great game. Go Bills.